the first.
There you go.
How alone we felt. Good afternoon. Wednesday, April 30th. We're coming to the end of April here. We are back as a committee trying to mark up and work up on S-123, miscellaneous motor vehicles law. We had left off and checked off section 14. I do know that 15, 16, and 17 and 18 are still being discussed, whatnot. So we're going to go to section 19 and start off from there on our summary list that I'm working off and off the language and the most recent piece. I thought that sort of, well, let's see, 19, 20, 21, 22. I don't know if Damien want to make a comment on any of them. I had them all checked off as updates and language updates, and
Section 19, are you on?
we're on section 19.
Yeah, so 19 added,
Skipping 15, 19 for now. Coming
Yeah.
back.
I had 19 as okay. It adds requirements for CDL instructors. So there's already a basic requirement to qualify for an instructor's license, but this adds CDL specific requirements of actual experience driving and being licensed to drive commercial motor vehicles.
And we got some pretty significant testimony from the DMV on that piece.
Yep.
Matching the federal part.
Yeah, and I had this marked a week ago as being okay.
Anybody else have any questions about this piece? That's a thumbs up portion around the table.
Yep.
Okay.
The next one, 20 was motorcycle instructors. I also had this marked as okay. This reduced the years of licensed experience from 4 to 2 and changed it as to licensed experienced instead of just riding experience. So
We also heard about that in the testimony piece as well. So we're thumbs up on all of that. Okay. This is what we were hoping to get through. 21, this was the one company buying out the other company, right? It's just a name because it was referred to specifically.
this is the, no longer the NATA official used car guide. It's now the JD Power Values. And that is it.
So that was technical in nature. Does everybody agree with that?
Want to change the name again to the Lieutenant Governor John
Yeah.
Rogers on that?
Well, that part comes in.
So that's the
later.
next section.
There and then, yeah, it does that. I don't think that impacts this part of that, but it does in terms of his request to look at. He wants to come up with a new value, but we still have the language is referred to, so we got to update the language.
Yeah.
The language that he wants taken out, we should update it first before we take it out.
Sounds good.
So, in the next section, I actually had noted as waiting on Lieutenant Governor testimony, and that's how
That,
the commissioner computes the actual taxable cost of a motor vehicle. And that does get to Lieutenant Governor's testimony this morning.
I had 22 and sort of a line through it with sort of the top half and the second half where it says permits commissioner to develop process to determine value of vehicles not in JD Power values. And sort of the first part about replacing the name, that is technical for sure. I would think we would sort of check that off in a way, but this other we're gonna have to permits the commissioner to develop process to determine value of vehicles not in the JD.
Well, so
That ties in with some of the other sections.
part of what the Lieutenant Governor was testifying about is a couple of lines above that. It says that so if we read from the start, Harris, it basically provides the second sentence says, if the motor vehicle is not acquired by purchase in Vermont or is received for an amount that does not represent actual value, the commissioner may, in the commissioner's discretion, fix the taxable cost of the motor vehicle at the clean trade-in value of vehicles of the same make, type, model, and year of manufacture as designated by the manufacturer, as shown in JD Power Values, less the lease end value of any leased vehicle. So that is to some extent getting at the Lieutenant Governor's issue because it's this fixing I think if I understood his testimony, again, I don't want to speak for him, But my understanding was that the issue that he is concerned about is the way the value is fixed for some of these used cars. When the feeling that he has is that JD Power Values does not reflect that value. And I would, certainly defer to others, but that I think does actually get at some of his concerns.
So in
Identify.
statute
Gotta
for
identify.
vehicles that are newer, 20 years and newer.
Identify
Oh,
first.
sorry, Matt Russo, Deputy Commissioner, DMV. Vehicles that are 20 years and newer, we use the clean trade-in value, but there is nothing in statute, any language for vehicles that are older. So we use the low retail value using JD Power, which is the lowest value that we can use. So we're codifying that so that we have a process for taxing those vehicles that are older than 20 years. And that process is already in place. So we're, for those older vehicles that he's speaking of, we don't use the clean trade.
So this line that says the commissioner may develop a process to determine the value of vehicles that do not have a clean trade-in value. That was geared towards the items that are over 20 years old.
Correct.
You're just saying you do have a process.
We have a process in place because there is no clean trade-in value on JD Power for those older vehicles. And so we just want to put language in there that gives us a process to value vehicles.
Recognize the process you already have.
Which is the process.
Okay.
The authority.
We're just codifying.
I'm not sorry.
No, I guess so you're concurring with this language. Was this from you or?
This was theirs.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
And we had left it open because we were hearing about the idea of potentially whether we needed to, there was the whole section about asking them to look at this entire section piece. So we're going to hit this again in a later section then, right, Damien? This whole idea of is there a process, is there not? Is it public and whatnot? This section's about codifying something that we are, or putting in it, something that's already to catch up.
So, right, so this-
The whole issue of car value in another section.
There is a study also at the end of this that gets back to that issue of car value.
And not in section 22 though.
Yeah, so section 22 doesn't specifically get at that, but this is if we end up updating how we figure out that taxable value, this is the section that we'd probably start with in statute.
So you're saying we should leave it open for now until we get to the other sections?
I think I don't want to tell you whether you should leave it open or not, but I think that it's worth just understanding that this is that purchase and use tax piece that is at issue.
Phrase that. If we were going to discuss the other sections later, it would potentially drive us back to this section.
It could.
Okay, Representative Powell?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, if we were to change the way we do things going forward, which is not in this bill, I don't imagine we're going to do it in the next week or two. I don't think so. It might be something we take up.
Unless there's a proposal I don't know about,
Right.
it would
So,
take up
This
pretty big
really
list.
just says, hey, here's the new JD Powers. And hey, the commissioner has a process already. And this says, hey, the commissioner, we're saying the commissioner can develop that process, even though it's developed. We could have defined the process right there instead of saying it that way, I guess.
Start to develop on that. Put it in.
Yeah.
What are you holding back on?
Yes.
There is a later section that is gonna deal with, that would bring us
I'm
back.
saying, I think there's a later section that says, we request a study or a report.
Yeah,
Okay,
the last section in the bill.
Representative Case?
I was wondering, do you know the financial impact or what kind of financial impact we'd be taking if we did things the lieutenant governor's way?
On by the sale price that's listed. on the
Yeah,
bill
but
sale.
I mean, I guess it's a lot of variables there, but I didn't know if there's any.
That would be setting it up for a trust system and trusting that people are giving us the correct sale price. I can imagine people could put $500 if they want to, for the sale.
That could be a
So it'd
big,
be a
yeah.
huge impact on it.
Yeah.
Do you know how many
I'd like to
projects,
know that. I'd like to know that somewhat. Would be nice to know.
do you have an way of knowing how many private sales there are in Vermont because of the title and the registrations of the titles as they come in or change?
I would have to check.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I mean, that would only tell you the total amount of private sales, but wouldn't tell you what the values
Right.
impacted might be, anyway.
And we sell more used cars than new ones right now, right? Is that the, well, that could,
That's
I don't know.
This is-
That could be expensive.
This is the Lieutenant Governor's testimony is all about private sale as opposed to used on dealers. It's not registered dealer sales, it's all private sales. And the dealers did come in and testify that they don't have any trouble with the language the way it is. It's all of that is all about about private sales, right?
Yeah.
Representative
I'm
Couch?
just saying, I'm not sure we have time to take, I mean, we might agree it's a good idea or not. We would have to take testimony. I think, JFO could come up with what the numbers are. I mean, you know, what the impact would be. So I would suggest,
Assuming we have data that
yeah,
is accurate enough for us to find that, and there's time to actually drill into all of that. And that's the other thing. JFO is really good at their job, but I don't want to be the person in the seat who overpromises for them. Because they, like my office, also have very limited staff, just like the folks over at the administration.
but those are the people we would ask first.
Right. So, yeah, and that's what I'm hearing around the table is that for now, it sounds like this section is probably closed, and then look at the study later, which could come back with potential options to address the concerns that you heard about this morning.
Does anybody else have a comment or question on that?
Not very little.
Section 5. Representative Wood?
Well, so there was some talk about cars that are 20 years old or older. I'm just trying to find where that is in here.
I don't think it's not mentioned specifically in the statute. I think and
It's,
feel free to jump in, Deputy Commissioner. I think it's a reflection of what's actually in JD Power values and what's not, and then going from there. Is that about right?
There just is not an existing option for clean trade for those model years.
okay. So-
we need something.
And so the language that we're looking at right now, I mean, does address the Lieutenant Governor's concerns, except that there's not a clear process for determining the value of a vehicle that doesn't have a clean trade-in value. So it's just too nebulous. And is that what we're talking about? Trying to detail, but not right now because I don't have the time for it.
Well, so the department already has a process. This is just enabling language to basically say that we're okay with the department developing a process for these cars. It is something that we could put in statute, though typically we don't get into that level of minutia. For the same reasons that, we have a lot to work on. And so you tend to delegate that, usually with enabling language like this. This is something where if that report comes back next year with some pretty clear instructions, we could turn this into its own subject that says commissioner may develop a process or shall develop a process, and the process shall include the following. And then the commissioner would work off of that framework, and that may identify like 2 or 3 things that has to be in that process to maybe address things that are identified as gaps in the current process, if there are any, or maybe just to codify things in the current process that are working. That also happens off those studies. You realize that we're actually doing about as well as we can. And we want to make sure that that doesn't change going forward.
But again, that's only for cars that are 20 years older. John wants it for basically any
Private sale.
on a
Yeah.
private sale. So it doesn't really get at what he's asking for. That's later on.
But the commissioner may develop a process to determine the value of vehicles that do not have clean trade-in value in JD Power values. Okay.
And that's 20 years or older.
JD Powers only publishes to 20 years.
Okay.
That's what we're,
That's what the different selections for new vehicles or newer vehicles, it only goes to 20 years. For a clean trade beyond that, there's several other options that kind of you're limited once you get to those model years.
They give you 3 options on shape of the vehicle too, right? medium price, average price, high end.
The newer vehicles, they give you more options.
Right.
The older ones, you get 3.
Okay.
So are we comfortable checking this piece off or not?
Yeah.
I would like to see some thumbs up then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, 8. Okay,
Oh, and I'm sorry, I have to run to the Senate. Oh, never mind.
okay.
In that time, they passed the T-bill. So T-bill's done in the Senate.
Wow. So they didn't,
That's the voice well known.
You have
No
these side by
changes?
side?
yeah, no,
I'll have it by tomorrow.
okay.
Um,
Section 23. Right, we're on 23. Was this the part, we took some testimony from purchase and use tax refund. No, this was slightly different. But we did take testimony regarding refunds. That was on the fuel tax, not on this purchase and use tax.
I think the example here was somebody goes in, registers a used car, and they use the amount maybe in JD Powers, and then they go out and had a official evaluation and it's less, so they go in, or you sell a car within a certain amount and you get your refund.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways you can get the purchase and use refund. This just puts a limit on it of 1 year.
Do we have concerns, issues on a 1 year request?
Seems.
This is existing language entitled
Fair.
to for sale tax.
Right, it matches what
Match the sales tax?
sales
language?
tax. If you go
Well,
in
that helps.
and your, how you get your diesel tax too now went from 3 years to 1 year.
That's up in the next piece, so I guess I would ask then, is there anybody that has any concern about 23, or everybody's a thumbs up on 23? Thank you. And 24. Yes, we flip to another page. Permits commissioners accept proof other than return registration or plates as proof that vehicle. Gives a little bit more flexibility to the commissioner when a vehicle is lost, destroyed, disappeared, flooded, right?
Yeah.
We're giving them a little bit more leeway to help refund the monitors. I would say that we probably want to see that happen then.
Yeah.
Does everybody have any questions about that? Everybody's a thumbs up on this piece? Alright. And credits and refunds, this is something we did take testimony both from the, what is it, League of City Towns and from the fuel dealers, fuel dealer, the wholesalers of fuel and their lobby that said that they were all okay with 33 to 12, that municipalities needed to have their work done on budgets within 12 months, and that the wholesalers, so we heard this from a couple different parties. Was there anything anybody else has questions? We're good with thumbs up on 25, and we did our due diligence. Just want to make sure that everybody agrees. We heard from what we used to. 26. Clarifies the penalties for arbitration. We already had this one checked off as sort of good as a.
Technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any questions on this one? We're on section 26. You're not supposed to alter the $0. Well, I've heard. Thumbs up on that?
Yeah.
Okay, sheesh. I have the next sections, 27, 28, 29, and 30. This is where the emails were going back and forth on convictions and definition of convictions. Damien, I think that one that you just recently sent.
Yeah, and so this is okay. So Ben and I, we've also talked with Representative Lalonde and touched base on this. There is a section in the DUI bill, H-44, that says conviction or adjudication. But that's for purposes of Title IV. In Title 23, our definition of conviction, the very first thing that falls under that is a final adjudication. So we agreed that there was no need to update the language and that there's no conflict on these sections.
Except for June, so.
Yeah, so
Okay, then unless there's more questions on it, then they did do some background and judiciary was involved. So we're gonna, with a thumbs up, we're gonna check 27, 28, 29, and 30.
And then 31 is the same conversation.
Somebody's gonna come back and say they didn't all agree. I know.
31 is the same.
All right,
So it's the same conversation. It's H44 also does same bill. This is the at or above legal limits. H44 makes the same change. H44 makes one change that does not appear in here. But the way it's made would mean that the laws will just mesh together. And so that's a judiciary piece in that bill, but it doesn't conflict with anything in this bill. And likewise in section 32, you make one change in here that's not made in H44, but it doesn't conflict with anything in there. So, and I'll walk you through what the one change is for you. But the bottom line is we checked with judiciary. There's no conflict. And where they address the same piece, the language matches up.
I did get an email back from a response from Chair Lalonde on both these and Damien's work on there, so.
Yeah, so there, just see.
Maybe we'll do something else.
Yeah, I can just identify where the one change is in H44 that's not in our bill. Just for. Yeah, so it basically requires that when you send out a notice of suspension, H44 requires that the notice, currently it requires that it be mailed or given to the defendant. And H44 is going to also require that a copy be sent to the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles. So that's the one difference in their version of that section from our bill, and it wouldn't conflict with anything that's in our bill.
Okay,
And then the next section in our bill, section 32, this is the section on the notice of intent to suspend, which currently says that it serves as a temporary operator's license. And this is proposing to revise that form, so it does not state that it serves as a temporary operator's license. And H44 doesn't address this subsection at all, so there's no conflict here.
okay, so section 32 is the.
It's okay unless you've got an issue with it within this committee.
Okay, that's thumbs up. All right. 33, something that will have to go to Ways and Means, adding a fee for both electronic requests.
Yeah, although this should be quick up there. This reflects an existing fee per record. And so what this breaks down to is, I believe, if my math is correct, you can fit 31 records on a sheet, and the current charge per sheet is $10 per sheet. And so this is already being charged, but it's been creating confusion for customers who are asking for the records and for staff. And so this is just breaking out the per record when you have a fraction there. I think I got that right based on the notes I have from December and January when this was first requested. And feel free to jump in if I get it wrong. All right. Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions about this? Because it says electronic and because it says fees and records and whatnot, I notified our new digital services chair, who had no concerns, et cetera, but kind of maintain some relation.
And it was the same if you wanted a hard copy, it was 30 cents a page, right?
Yeah. So this is per record.
Right.
There is for copies. There are other copy charges that are set out on the department's website. And then there's this category for other records. I just got asked a question about this earlier, so hold on. Let's see. I broke this all out. So the records not otherwise specified are $10 a page rather than the 5 cents a copy or 2 cents for a computer printout. But that works out to 31 records on that page. So, and that's where the 30.3 cents comes in. So, and that's why we ended up with that really funny fraction of a penny in there. So, but that's what this is. So it's a different group of records. There are other copies, and then there's charges for programming if you need to do special programming to be able to pull all the records down, et cetera. Yeah. So and those charges are broken out between the department's website and the rest of 23 VSA 114. I just didn't include them because I think there's like 23 lines above this that go into these charges. So
on previous system, you requested this, you got a page was $10, 31 records fit on a page. So you get only monthly, you're getting 31. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah. And then you might also have to pay for like the DVD or something like that if you're still copying these onto a DVD. But that charge is still in there if you request it on a DVD to pay for the cost of the disc. So
I'm just curious, 30 records on a page.
31.
And these are records like, I want to see 30.
That's a better question for the department. I
just
don't
like-
know what these,
These are for bulk records, so bulk information.
Like, what is that?
We have a listing of vehicles. The number.
A listing of vehicles. So I wanted a list of all the red Camaros in the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
And so 30 listings of red Camaros would fit on one page. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just having a hard time visualizing 30 records on a page, but okay.
Good choice.
yeah.
I was inspired by Representative last year.
Very inspirational.
you still got boxes and boxes of that green pin fed paper over there in the DMV. All right, so questions or more questions on 33? Thumbs up on 33? All right.
And 34 is updating the statute to reflect the existing schedule for registration fees for trucks based on weight. I have this marked off as okay. It's not actually changing current fees. I will have to run through it with the folks. Wait, they're down the hall now. I'm used to being on the second floor with my committees and having to point upstairs for Ways and Means and at one time appropriations, but old habits. I have. This is great.
Rarefied air.
Yeah, I'm in a Senate committee that has extra space and morning sunlight. And I'm on the top floor here. Got a view of the rooftops. I mean,
And the air is thinner too.
well, that explains, the lightheadedness and what.
Yep.
Yeah, the quality of the testimony. Ramble.
Nice view of the woods out.
Yeah.
Clerical piece, right?
There you go, Ken.
Right. This is-
The deer comes, no, that was when I was sitting over there. So, yes,
Yeah.
clerical in nature, 34, it's an updated weight. That's a bunch of hands up. Thank you very much.
I was.
Oh, no, it's a question?
Yeah. it's a question.
Yeah.
We're saying this isn't any change, and we've said it once, twice, and in my mind, I'm like, well, but saying from 25,999 to 26,099 seems like a change, so maybe it was explained.
Fee do they mean?
Just we were,
So-
we described this as, no, this is how it's done, and now it's just more
I
accurate.
think it follows the schedule.
Yeah, so there's a schedule, and the schedule is based off of, I'll have to get into the meeting so I can pull up my screen, but the problem with the statute there is, there's this language that says that, the fractions of a hundredweight are not, the hundredweight are not counted. And so the way it was interpreted for purposes of the schedule, or maybe the schedule was there and they drafted, was instead of just putting in the numbers, we have this fractions of a hundredweight language, and then the numbers tie to that. And so this just gets rid of the language, which is, I think, really hard to can sort of construe and suss out, and just puts the numbers on the page so that the law matches up to the schedule. And you're not trying to go, well, is this why the schedule goes up, starts at 99 pounds above 20,000 or 20,099? And so let me just pull that up for you now that I'm in the meeting.
And following that, that would imply that these numbers really weren't right. The real numbers are the new numbers.
Well, so I think the numbers on the schedule were right. But it's this: fractions of 1,000 pounds shall be computed at the next highest 1,000 pounds, excepting, however, that fractions of a hundredweight shall be disregarded. So the way that was interpreted was that previously it said if it exceeds 80,000 pounds but does not exceed 90,000 pounds, or let's do 70,000 to 80,000. So the way that was interpreted was anything over 70,000 pounds would go up to, or anything over 80,000 pounds would be considered 81,000 pounds, except that we're disregarding the fractions of a hundredweight. So anything under that first 100 still counts under the lower one. And I have to imagine that this gets back to the accuracy of scales at a certain point, where if the scale's off by 30 pounds, you don't want to charge someone for the next 10,000 pounds. But this is the way the language was, and then the schedule was built off of that. And disregarding that first 100 pounds, or everything under the first 100 pounds, and then everything above going to the next weight category. And so we're just reflecting it here in the statute, which would have probably been the simpler way.
So I'm going to say it one more time. So the numbers here were not quite accurate to reflect how it was to be interpreted.
The numbers in the existing law did not reflect how it was interpreted. The numbers in the new law do reflect how it's interpreted. And presumably the scales are, if it was an accuracy thing back in the day.
It's logical.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's my best guess, but what do I know? But that's my best guess, is that this is probably something that some hapless attorney or drafter for somewhere in here, because you guys didn't have attorneys that far back. You only had attorneys about 45 years back, and then before that, it was whoever from staff or from the agency or the AG's office you could get to help you draft the language. And I'm guessing that was a solution that was come up with at some point for that or some similar reason.
But to your point, in effect, if you had 70,050 pounds, you would have paid the higher rate when you should have, if you should pay the lower rate now. So in that every 100, there is the 100-pound range where you'd be in a lower scale then for that 100 pounds before you bump up to the next one.
Yep.
But it's only about 100 pounds, and it's interpretation saying that it wasn't. So in effect, I would agree with what you're saying. It was not entirely correct before.
Well, I'm using to be loss of revenue.
By the
Oh, you
100
did,
pounds.
right.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
it says to me.
Yeah.
Something happened on the
But
fort
for the 100
for proceeding or something,
pounds
you think?
on the size of it,
No, I think this is something where
not an impact. That's what it's.
this was in the department's technical corrections, if I remember right.
Yep.
And it is another thing where, just like the bulk electronic records, they looked at the schedule, they looked at the statute, and they said they don't match up. It'd be really good if the statute and the schedule match up for folks. So that it's clear to people, if they look at the law or they look at the schedule, they get the same answer. And you don't have to interpret the legalese at the very end here to try to figure out what that rate is going to be. So that's my understanding, is that this is part of that effort. And this is, in my 11 years working for the General Assembly, this is a not uncommon occurrence that we find these things in the statute. The agency brings them to our attention, or a constituent does, and then we realize that, along the way, things have, they don't match up entirely, and the way it was originally enacted is not a model of clarity, as we like to say. And so we just try to clarify it.
I'm gonna ask one more question and note that this is not one I want to present on the floor. Be challenged by it. So this is the statute. Where's the schedule?
I believe that's at the DMV's website.
It's on our website.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
So this is a registration fee.
right,
So
so the DMV made a schedule based on the statute.
right,
And that last line there.
and that last line, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's key piece, is that, hey, here are the numbers, but hey, don't forget, you round up based on that line.
Representative Keezer's
I
document here.
have, pardon me, but I have filled out hundreds of these, and every single form that you have tells you what the weights are and what the fees are. So every single registration has that for every truck weight listed exactly as we're describing.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now so that everyone can just see it.
This purely is technical.
Yeah.
Clarification.
So here you can see the loaded weight by fuel,
Yeah.
and then the categories here, and then links on the categories. So if you have questions, what do I qualify as? And then it goes down, and you see it goes from the up to 99, and then to 99, and so on, right down. You can get every 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And my God, I don't ever want to have to register a 90,000 pound truck, because that's a lot. But yeah, you can see those registration fees. That,
I think I got it now. Yeah.
Okay.
I see that. You look at that last statement, it tells you to do that. And when you built the schedule, you did. But when you read this, you're like, wait a minute here, it doesn't match the schedule. But it does. Yeah.
all right.
Representative White?
Math question.
So if I'm remembering correctly, we had some testimony about max tax and people gaming the system to pay a lower max tax. Is that regarding registration fees or purchase and use?
That max tax was, my understanding, purchase and use has a max
Yes.
on the overweights. That's a registration fee, which is,
It's a purchase and use tax issue.
but that was registration that we were just looking at.
In conjunction with RSU. Over 10.
No.
We will look at that next session.
Okay.
Will we?
Well, I'm writing that short bill right now.
Okay, I get punchy in the afternoons. It always goes bad from after 3, but I pick it back up after 8. So where are we at?
Section
35.
Section 35. Should I dare say, is there 7 or 8 thumbs up somewhere out there on this section?
It's okay.
Or 34? Or 35?
35? Oh, no, 34.
We were on 30.
34 is a yes,
Yes.
Yes.
and 35 is, oh, somehow we had to define male. That sounds technical to me. That's what I recall. I had a note on here.
Yep.
Anybody have a concern about the definition of male? With an I?
Well, we We did this several years back. We have a definition. of it.
Yeah, you added it last
Yes,
year,
we did.
and then this is bringing it over to purchase and use tax.
Okay.
That's all.
I remember doing a definition.
Yep,
Okay.
this is, yeah, purely
I mean, like,
technical.
Yeah, it was a technical.
This is just a purely technical. The department administers purchase and use tax. They're using that definition of mail. We're putting it in there so it's clear what forms of communication that includes.
Electronic.
So, yeah, this is,
That definition now says, it might show up daily, it might not.
we haven't gotten down to that level. It'll be sorted in Connecticut, even if you send it from, no. Sorry.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You're positive, then that's.
Great, this is a great addition.
Well, now we're on section.
My finest work.
3.
Really is. 36, I had this as waiting on the Lieutenant Governor's testimony from this morning. And this is the appeals for the liability and creating educational and outreach materials regarding the appeal process. And my understanding is the department already has those procedures. Again, we're adding language that codifies the requirement that the commissioner establish procedures. So.
And this section is DMV requested.
Yes.
And the commissioner shall create educational outreach material for taxpayers that provide information regarding the appeals process established pursuant. So the DMV is adding to their own language that they want to enhance their communication and outreach to people to let them know that there is an appeals process and that they can go through. Want to help refresh my memory?
It is existing, so I think this was in conjunction with the request for the section 43, which was the study.
So was it your proposal or was your proposal to add 36 on section 36? Did I have that wrong in terms of? In section 36, I have it marked as this was a DMV request, and I'm not so sure that that's the case.
I have clarifying language, this whole section, but I couldn't.
So it's clarifying the appeal,
Yeah.
document and process what you already do is what I wrote down from testimony that I think you gave on
Yeah.
36.
Yeah.
Or codifying language, it's just codifying, clarifying.
Yeah, so it's codifying something that they already do.
Just
And
keep it open because the question was whether or not it went far enough based on what we were going to hear for testimony or whatnot. I
right.
guess I want to make sure that we're all clear.
The lieutenant governor was gonna come in and talk. Did he talk on this?
He talked on.
Well, he was talking in general about the purchase and use tax. And so this relates to appealing it. So the example he gave this morning of the Subaru, where the clean trade-in value was, I think, 12,000 and the purchase price was 7,500. That would have been something that would have been subject to an appeal. So that's why this was held open for Lieutenant Governor testimony. Or could have been subject to an appeal.
And that is something we already list on the letter that you have the option to appeal. Say as well.
Who handles the appeal?
The AIT hearings.
The transportation board or whatnot? Or
Hearings unit, but AIT has the hearings unit.
Okay.
So I just have a clarifying
Yes,
question.
please.
So this is calling for the commissioner to establish procedures for taxpayer for disputing the tax due.
Mhm.
And is there a timeline, like this will be effective July 1st, 2025? And will This procedure will include details like this will be appealed before the board, the AOT board, et cetera. Okay, and
That's existing.
Yeah, so we're codifying a requirement that they adopt or that they establish these procedures, which they've already established. So this is another sort of filling in statutory authority there, which
So they have a procedure and establishment, something they do already, but it's not called for in the law, so they kind of like to have it in the law that that's.
we're calling for it explicitly instead of implying that they need to have the procedure. And anytime you've got a tax liability or something like that, where the government is taking your property, whether it's money or something else, you have a due process right to appeal that decision. And so they already constitutionally would need to provide some sort of process. And this is codifying in statute that the commissioner shall establish procedures, which the commissioner has done to make sure that that process is provided. And so this is where I like to think of this as we have like already got the path laid out, but we're connecting some of the, maybe the map is in front of us and we're connecting some of the dots on the map that haven't been connected.
but so if the commissioner already has a procedure,
Mhm.
why don't we just put the procedure in here? As opposed to saying.
Because the commissioner may
established.
change the procedure over time. So that is not infrequent. With procedures, they don't have to go through rulemaking unless there's a petition from enough citizens to require it to be adopted as a rule. So oftentimes as, say, technology changes or hearings office staff changes or something like that, the procedures will get updated to reflect that. A good example of this is just in the last couple decades, we went from you file an appeal by mailing an appeal form to such and such address within so many days. And then it became, you could submit the appeal electronically. And then it became, you can email an appeal to this address. And so as time goes on and things change, perhaps with the updates to the website, there will be a way to go into your MyDMV account at some point in the future and to file your appeal that way, because you'll get maybe there will be a button. And I don't know. Anyone who's listening, don't hold the department to this, but this is the thing, is the procedures change. So codifying these procedures is something that we do at our own risk, because it means that they become much harder to update, because it requires them to come back here between January and May and then get into the minutia of the procedure with us. And it's often.
It just seems a little bit, I'm just questioning the timing of commissioners shall establish procedures for appeal, but that's already happening.
Right.
And the commissioner shall create educational outreach materials for the appeals process, which is already set. So it's like, how are you going to educate
So
the public about a process that we don't want to codify?
the thing to, so I think there's a couple things here. One is that the shall establish is always kind of funny language. That just means the way to think about that is, so we think about, when you first hear someone say, you shall do this, it's the future tense. You're talking about you're going to do this down the road. In statute, though, when we use the shall, it means that you're required to have this. And for whatever reason, we don't say the commissioner is required to have procedures for appeal. We just say the commissioner shall establish. And then the shall create educational and outreach materials. My understanding is that there are already some, but then this would, again, require that they continue to provide those educational and outreach materials going forward. So it's worth thinking of this as basically creating an ongoing requirement that they maintain a procedure and educational and outreach materials that make the public aware of that procedure going forward. As far as the details of those outreach materials, I would look to the department to tell you what they are and what they are. But the best way to think about this is we are codifying an ongoing requirement for the department to maintain these procedures and outreach materials going forward. And I agree, the language is archaic and not always the best.
So I guess my question becomes, do we want to, we have, maybe this is a good spot to, as we're getting it, maybe we should. Tomorrow morning, the whole morning is back with the DMV, back with Ledge Council and solving just any of the parts that we skipped for today. So we can leave it open if there's still a question,
I just have,
and check this part off, or we can,
well, I just have one question on this one. I don't know. Where the lieutenant governor's concern was, or why is this his concern, or was his concern back on the other portion that we're using the JD Powers values thing for? And this section is how they would appeal, he would appeal if the JD Powers value was higher than what he purchased a car for.
He doesn't like any of this. He
Yeah,
wants,
doesn't
if
like
you
any.
have a sale, if you sell me a car.
We should use that.
$500, I just submit that receipt to DMV and that's the tax that I pay, and they're gonna take my word on it,
Okay,
is what he would.
Okay.
In a nutshell,
okay,
private sales.
okay.
We could ask, what are some examples of appeals? So could you appeal that, hey, it's not really worth that? And then we understood that process would be, well, then go to a car dealer and get an, official estimate from them.
Correct.
But is there another way to appeal?
For the purchase and use tax, the dealer appraisal is the only way to appeal
Okay.
currently.
So your education would say if you're appealing the purchase and use tax, here's the process.
Yes. And we have that process documented on our website as well.
And another one of those concerns, he says the cost of these appraisals are gonna outweigh the amount that you would have to pay. in
Right, so I was
tax.
gonna say, you're paying on the JD Powers value
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah.
And then if you appeal it, you may or may not get a refund on that because you have to pay.
person to appraise it.
Right, well, no, you have to pay the purchase and use tax amount based on the JD Powers values book value.
Yeah.
And if you paid less than that, then you can appeal. And so you're paying ahead on something you didn't actually, you're paying more taxes because you didn't pay that price that JD Powers values.
Well, you have to pay that, right?
You have to pay that price ahead of, I mean, you're paying it
To register.
to register the vehicle. So, okay, I get it.
so
Yeah.
the
And
example,
then this is added to say that DMV has to have established some procedure for people like me who purchased a vehicle for $4,000 less than the JD Powers values, so that I have an avenue to say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't pay that. I paid 8,000, not 12,000. And this is the way they appeal.
That's the current system, that's what we
Okay.
have, yeah.
and the issue being if you pay $4,000 less, that's $240 of purchase and use tax. You go to a dealer to get an appraisal and they're gonna charge you $240.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't know that's the case. That's what the testimony said today. He would, I guess, also then suggest that the appeals process of that being the only way to submit an appeal is not expansive enough, that there's not enough opportunity to appeal would be, I suspect what that would mean.
Yeah, thanks. I wonder, would there be another, if I bought a scrapped vehicle that had been totaled and that I'm now gonna fix it, and I fixed it, and I show, hey, look, I spent, $4,000 on parts and whatnot, and now I wanna register it. Could I appeal that and show, look, it was
If you had an appraisal, but before that, I will say that if it is totaled and it becomes a rebuilt vehicle, we subtract 20% off of the clean trade value.
Okay,
You're saying rebuilt on the title?
Discount.
You're saying rebuilt on the title is 20%? Okay.
So one more question, and this may be for you, Matt. If I have a local mechanic that works on my car and does my oil change and everything else to my car, can I get an appraisal from him or does it have to be a dealer?
Has to be a certified dealer.
It has to be a certified dealer, so if he happens to be selling used cars, will he be a certified dealer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the DMV if they're certified.
Okay,
So the request for this language was well before and separate from the discussion about the private sale discussion. This initial request from the DMV was to get into the language, the process they already used. Now, what we're being asked is that expansive enough and should there be more? And
Right.
should we take that down? And where should we look at private sale values? Is that? not-
yeah, I just don't know how we would have. the
And I'm not
time to do
saying,
that. Yeah,
and I'm not saying that, I just want to make sure it's clear about what's being asked and then also with the testimony and how they're related but separate. They're related, but they're separate. The complaint is that this process is not even in the language. It's not even in the law. Needs to be adjusted. We probably got to get it in the law first,
right.
I suspect.
Yeah.
That would be my understanding of this. Is everybody on the, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is,
Fine.
are we putting this in or are we not putting this in? Is the question, or are we, we're putting it in, 1,
Yep.
2, 3, 4,
Yep.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 36 goes in. That doesn't close the door on what the testimony that we had. So we're 4:00. We've got this, unless you think you can add 37 in the next minute, because that one's,
37 is really easy. It's technical change. In the points section, we have 8 points assessed for the 2 other statutes that are related to being 30 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. For whatever reason, it omitted the 3rd statute in Title 23 that relates to a violation for driving 30 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. And so this is just correcting that and adding it in.
we're gonna go 30 miles over our typical speed limit and maybe approve this, huh? In 1 minute.
so that one is clerical of nature. If everybody's good with that or not, but
Yep.
thumbs up on 37. Tomorrow morning, we will have the DMV crew and the Ledge Council back in, and we will add to your list to say that we also got to touch back base on number 11 to both of your lists. 11 is the only one we left open until, so 11, and then 15, 16, 17, 18 are on the list of the agenda for tomorrow. And then we're up to tinting, 38, 39, 40, 41. And then also then 42 on off-road or ATVs. And then 43 sort of ties back in to what we've been hearing about values and purchase and use tax. So that's where we're at, unless everybody will make sure we're clear. Tomorrow, we're working on those open sections with the same group and with the DMV and with the Ledge Council, trying to get to resolution on the rest of the sections and where we're at. And then if we get through that part, then we'll add, we need to add number 11 wasn't on that list and 43 wasn't on the list for tomorrow. And we can also talk more about the one you're trying to add in. So,
Like that, yeah, we have testimony on Friday.
oh, so we have more testimony on Friday, but we can also, well, then we potentially will also discuss it before that piece. But we're going to continue to mark up what exists in S123 all tomorrow until we get it resolved. And then got more testimony later in the week on it. If people have questions, concerns, or other changes or potential anything else that's going on in it, make sure you reach out to me in the next 24 to 48 hours if we missed anything. Anybody have any last comments?
See you in May.
Thank you very much. See you in May. Very good. Thank you very much.